the opening framework of Andor redefined how the Empire functions within the Star Wars narrative by removing the mythic components that traditionally shape its presence. Instead of portraying the regime through symbols of overwhelming power, such as superweapons or dark side authority, the series presented the Empire as a political and administrative system grounded in recognizable institutional mechanisms. This shift transformed the depiction of oppression from a spectacle-driven threat into a procedural force shaped by documentation, classification, and bureaucratic authority. The cinematic introduction emphasized environments controlled by policy rather than by supernatural interventions, establishing a tone where danger emerged from systems rather than individuals. By eliminating the reliance on Sith imagery, Andor redirected attention to the operational components that sustain authoritarian power. The absence of force-centered antagonism allowed the series to examine how surveillance networks, data indexing, and legal frameworks create forms of control that require no visible coercion. This portrayal reframed the Empire as a state apparatus whose influence extended into daily routines through administrative design. Characters encountered restrictions not because of mythical intimidation, but because of regulations that dictated movement, communication, and legal standing. This model presented the Empire as a system that does not rely on dramatic confrontation to enforce compliance. The depiction of authority concentrated heavily on procedures rather than on ideological declarations. Meetings within imperial institutions demonstrated how decisions were shaped by policy compliance, performance metrics, and risk projections. These environments revealed that the Empire maintained power through operational consistency and predictable responses. The significance of this portrayal lies in its analytical focus on how individuals within a system contribute to its stability by performing specialized tasks without questioning their broader implications. By presenting oppression as the cumulative result of routine administrative decisions, the series established a grounded and realistic depiction of authoritarian governance. The humanization of imperial officers served as another structural element contributing to the Empire's portrayal. Characters such as Dedra Meero were shown operating within professional frameworks that valued efficiency, accuracy, and commitment to institutional objectives. Their motivation stemmed not from malice, but from dedication to order and procedural integrity. This form of characterization demonstrated how individuals can become agents of oppressive systems through adherence to organizational priorities rather than through personal hostility. The analytical value of this approach lies in its emphasis on how authoritarian power often emerges from individuals who believe they are contributing to stability rather than to domination. The narrative design highlighted how the Empire weaponized legality to maintain dominance. Sentencing structures, travel restrictions, and documentation checks were presented as tools that created an atmosphere of persistent vulnerability. Characters did not encounter violence as their primary threat. Instead, they faced shifting regulations that could criminalize ordinary behavior without warning. The focus on legal manipulation revealed a model of control based on interpretive flexibility, where the same laws that govern security can be adjusted to expand state power. Through this lens, the Empire became an entity defined by the capacity to alter the boundaries of legality at will. Central to the series was the idea that the Empire's strength originated from its predictability. Systems designed to identify anomalies, track civilian behavior, and evaluate deviations provided a structured means of suppressing dissent. Individuals who attempted to resist did not face retaliation from symbolic agents such as Sith Lords, but from processes that flagged their behavior as irregular within monitored environments. This emphasis on pattern detection reframed rebellion as a statistical disruption rather than as a dramatic confrontation, illustrating how authoritarian regimes maintain control through constant observation rather than through overt displays of force. The portrayal of everyday environments reinforced the pervasive reach of the Empire. Marketplaces, workplaces, and public transport hubs incorporated visible and invisible forms of surveillance designed to regulate behavior. Clearances, inspections, and identity verification procedures functioned as routine components of civic life. By depicting these systems as ordinary, the series demonstrated how authoritarian control can integrate itself into social infrastructure. This approach revealed that the empire's influence persisted not because of extraordinary acts, but because of consistent, normalized enforcement embedded into civic routines. Andor also examined how authoritarian institutions rely on internal competition to maintain operational efficiency. Within the ISB, officers pursued intelligence breakthroughs not solely for security purposes, but for career advancement, contributing to an environment where adherence to procedure aligned with personal incentive. This dynamic created a model where the system sustained itself through self-reinforcing motivation. The analytical significance of this structure lies in how it showed the empire as a regime strengthened by internal ambition rather than by imposed fear, illustrating a more grounded form of institutional functionality. The economic dimension of imperial control was portrayed through labour management and resource extraction. The empire's approach to industrial oversight emphasised quotas, standardised output, and productivity monitoring. Characters encountered exploitation not through spectacular displays of power, but through mandatory labour systems that relied on repetitive tasks and measurable efficiency. This representation highlighted how authoritarian regimes can maintain large-scale control through economic frameworks that reduce individuals to units of production. The absence of mythical elements made the system appear more tangible and aligned with real-world models of industrial authoritarianism. The series also examined how information management served as a tool of control. Within imperial offices, tasks involving data analysis, incident tracking, and report generation were treated as routine components of professional responsibility. Discussions involving the implementation of interrogations or the adjustment of sentencing practices were approached with the same procedural tone as resource allocation or staffing assignments. By framing oppressive actions as outcomes of administrative workflow, the narrative illustrated how authoritarian regimes normalize harm by embedding it within bureaucratic processes. This approach removed emotional impetus from oppressive behavior, making the system more efficient and more difficult to challenge. The dynamic between officers in the ISB provided insight into how institutional culture reinforces authoritarian efficiency. Personnel evaluated one another based on productivity, compliance, and initiative, creating an environment where advancement depended on demonstrating an ability to interpret data and anticipate threats. This incentive structure encouraged individuals to refine surveillance practices and expand the scope of oversight. The absence of moral hesitation within these interactions demonstrated that the empire's strength stemmed not from individuals seeking dominance, but from employees seeking professional success within an authoritarian framework. This structure illustrated how oppressive systems can be strengthened through ordinary workplace ambitions, rather than through ideological fanaticism. The economic dimension of the empire's operations further reinforced its systemic influence. The narrative depicted production environments where workers were reduced to quantifiable outputs, and any interruption to expected performance resulted in swift policy adjustments. Shifts in sentencing, recalibrations of labour expectations, and revisions to transportation schedules demonstrated that economic efficiency was prioritised above individual welfare. The absence of transparency regarding the purpose of manufactured components illustrated how the regime separated labour from meaning, creating a system in which citizens participated in their own oppression without understanding their role. This model of economic control emphasised that exploitation can be most effective when concealed within routine activity. Another significant component of the empire's portrayal involved its treatment of language and communication. Administrative terminology was used to classify individuals, manage risks, and categorise behaviour. Words such as deviation, compliance, and optimization were employed to justify decisions that resulted in detention, interrogation, or surveillance escalation. By embedding harmful actions within neutral terminology, the empire obscured the ethical implications of its policies. This linguistic framing demonstrated how authoritarian systems rely on controlled vocabulary to rationalize their decisions. The analytical impact of this approach lay in showing that oppressive outcomes can be produced through language that appears procedural rather than punitive. The behavior of civilian employees further illustrated how systemic structures encourage conformity. Workers stationed at checkpoints, processing hubs, or sentencing offices followed established procedures without questioning the rationale behind them. Their actions were shaped by documentation requirements, operational guidelines, and expected response patterns. The series showed that compliance within authoritarian systems does not always require ideological alignment, but can result from adherence to routine. This portrayal emphasized that the Empire's strength originated from the consistency of its lower-level personnel, whose participation sustained the broader framework without the need for dramatic enforcement. The design of imperial workplaces reinforced the portrayal of the Empire as a system built on administrative order. Environments were characterized by uniform architecture, standardized equipment, and hierarchical workflow structures. Employees navigated these spaces according to predetermined pathways that regulated movement, communication, and decision-making. This spatial organization reflected how authoritarian systems use physical design to shape behavior and reinforce compliance. By controlling the layout of workspaces, the Empire limited opportunities for dissent, collaboration, or deviation from procedure. This emphasis on environmental control illustrated how power can manifest through architecture as effectively as through policy. The narrative also demonstrated how unpredictability within an authoritarian legal system functions as a psychological tool. Sentences could be extended without explanation, charges could be altered without notification, and individuals could be transferred without cause. This instability created a climate where citizens anticipated consequences regardless of their actions, producing an atmosphere of widespread caution. Unlike the dramatic fear generated by traditional Star Wars antagonists, this portrayal presented fear as a byproduct of inconsistency within bureaucratic systems. The analysis shown in Andor revealed that unpredictability can be a more effective mechanism of control than overt displays of force. The cumulative effect of these elements established a model in which the Empire's most frightening attribute was its reliance on ordinary individuals performing ordinary tasks within a structure designed to maintain control without requiring constant supervision. The regime's stability depended on the integration of administrative consistency, environmental design, economic exploitation, and linguistic framing. By removing the fantastical components that traditionally defined imperial power, Andor revealed that authoritarian systems thrive not through spectacle, but through normalized behavior distributed across countless institutional layers. This depiction grounded the Empire in recognizable mechanisms of governance, demonstrating that its effectiveness stemmed from systemic design rather than from mythic authority. Taken together, Andor presented the Empire as an institution whose strength derived from the predictability of its processes and the compliance of its workforce. The series offered an analytical exploration of how authoritarian regimes sustain themselves through a combination of bureaucratic control, economic regulation, and psychological manipulation. By focusing on institutional behavior rather than individual villains, Andor demonstrated that the Empire's dominance emerges from systems that appear rational on the surface, but function as mechanisms of pervasive control. This narrative reframing revealed why the Empire remains an effective force within the Star Wars universe, and why its portrayal in Andor stands out as one of the most analytically grounded examinations of authoritarian power in the franchise's history.
Thank you for watching. Be sure to like, subscribe, and hit that share button. My main channel is Critical Analysis Hub, where I post Star Wars content about the movies. My secondary channel is Critical Analysis Hub Plus, where I focus on the shows of Star Wars. And my third channel is Critical Analysis Hub XP, where I post comic books. Be sure to take a moment and check them out. Thanks, and may the Force be with you.